My grandson Manny and a couple of his buddies got all excited the other night during a sleepover while they were watching a popular Vietnam War movie, chock full of combat action. You probably know the movie. It was one of the better ones. At breakfast the next morning, my grandson looked up at me between bites of his pancake and abruptly asked me, "Hey, Papa, while you were in Vietnam flying those Huey helicopters, did you ever know any real heroes? You know, like some of the guys in that movie." Well, actually, Manny, in my book, I think everyone who served in Vietnam was in one way or another a real hero. I can tell you this, though, for sure, there were a lot of guys I flew with over there who did some pretty remarkable heroic stuff. But if you ask them directly, "Are you a hero?" they'll tell you they were just doing their job. Well, Papa, can you tell us about some of those guys you knew? You know, the hero guys. Tell us what they did that made them a hero. Well, many names do come to mind, but there's one particular dude I flew with one day, on one hell of a bad day, in a very, very bad place, called Dong Tam. That's the home of the 9th Infantry in Vietnam. In fact, back in those days, that place was so bad, our operations officer used to put on the board the night before we had to go there, "Go Dong Tam, never come back." I'll tell you what, how about I let you guys hear a hero's war story in his own words? Back then, he was Chief Warrant Officer Charles Campbell. I can vouch for his story because I was his co-pilot that day. Listen up, you're going to hear a real war story about the day Charlie and I flew to that place, Dong Tam, to pick up some really tough 9th Infantry soldiers who were hell-bent on a search and destroy mission. Okay, Charlie, why don't you take over and tell these boys about that day we went to Dong Tam.
Well, Mr. Crane, I guess I've put this off long enough. So I'm sitting there on the deck with a glass of scotch and a cigar with my daughter Jess and her husband Arliss. I'm going to tell you the story about the day you and I had an exciting adventure to the best of my remembrance. So, when we got to the operations center that morning, I was informed that I was going to fly first pilot that day because there was not enough aircraft commanders to fill up the flight. So I thought, that's pretty good. That's not a bad deal. So they said, we're going to put you in chalk 3, so you have 2 guys in front of you and 2 behind you, so you can't screw up too bad. They'll keep you straight. And little did we know that we wouldn't end up that way all day. We were flying with the 9th Infantry Division down in their sector, which was probably the worst mission that we had, because we all knew the day we got assigned to work for the 9th Division was going to be a long, long day. Their operation technique was the Eagle Flight, a company of infantry from place to place to place until they found the enemy. Then we would go get the rest of the division, if that's what it took, to pile on to the fight. That's the way 9th Division operated. So, somewhere around mid-morning, I guess, they made serious contact near a little village called Rocky, and we were called to insert more and more of the 9th Infantry Division soldiers. They were trying to surround the village, but the back part of it, backside, was heavily wooded, and they were concerned that the enemy could egress back through those woods and get away. The only landing zone anywhere in that area was a small pineapple field that was just big enough to hold 4 helicopters. So we were sent to take a platoon of infantry into that pineapple field as a blocking force so nobody could get out the backside. And of course, being Chalk 3, we were included in the 4. And we went to go into this pineapple field in a staggered trail right formation, which means that I was directly behind the lead aircraft. Chalk 2 was off to his right, Chalk 4 was off to my right. As we got down close to the ground, probably 100 feet or so, Chalk 4, who was flown by a fellow named Tom Crosby, started pulling up abreast of us on short final into the landing zone. I was more concerned with his position than I was about anything else, as we were awfully close together going into this little teeny field, and he was supposed to be off the right flank, but he was pulled right up alongside on our right side. And I was watching him very closely as we were coming down toward the ground, and we got about probably 50 feet up, and a rocket-propelled grenade came out of the tree line, hit his aircraft right where the tail boom meets the fuselage, and blew the tail boom over top of us and landed on the other side. The aircraft hit the ground, rocked left, the blades hit the ground, it rocked back right, and just was engulfed in flames. But in that rocking process, I saw the crew all get flung out or exit the aircraft, and we're all outside of the flames. So Chalk 1 and Chalk 2 executed an immediate takeoff as soon as the troops were unloaded, and that left us in the LZ, and I decided I would stay and extract the crew from the downed aircraft. So as I started to hover up toward where they were located, I could see the guy with the RPG had reloaded and was trying to take a bead on us. So I very quickly hovered back and put the burning aircraft between me and him. He would run back and I'd pull up. He'd run up, I'd pull back. And we were doing this cat and mouse thing back and forth, and I was screaming for somebody to shoot the son of a bitch. My door gunner, for some reason, couldn't see him. Couldn't pick him up. The Mustang's gunships were trying to support, but nobody could see him, I guess, for a while. And finally, the Mustang put down fire where he was, and I saw the guy go down and knew that we were okay then to hover up and get the crew. I had seen Crosby and Lieutenant Toffee with the co-pilot run forward and get behind the dike, and I knew where they were. So and regressing a little bit, I had told the crew chief to get out and go get the downed crew. And he was out running around the middle of the landing zone looking at me, holding his hands up like, where the hell is everybody? And bullets flying everywhere. I'm talking about. It was a hot situation. So finally, I hovered forward, we picked up the down crew, and then they started putting wounded soldiers on board also. I mean, there was dead and wounded everywhere in the landing zone. So when I finally got more than I could hover with, I told them I can't take any more, so we got to take off with just what we got. And while we were trying to sort all this stuff out, I heard a Cobra on guard call our boss and say, aircraft in the vicinity of Rockine that's in this little field. You have an aircraft on the ground, and there's about 30 enemy soldiers approaching them from the rear. Here I can't see behind the right side there. And he said, request permission to engage. And the boss said, go be my guest. So he came down to hover right up in front of us, up probably 100 feet in the air and cut 3 miniguns loose right across the top of our aircraft into the enemy that was behind us. And all of a sudden, tracers started going through, and I could see them hitting his aircraft. So he said, we're hit. So he took off. By this time, we had loaded everybody up and finally managed to. And the aircraft was so heavy, we couldn't make a decent, reasonable takeoff. So we had to slide along the ground, bounce over the dikes. And when we finally got airborne, we were under the trees, came up through, cut a bunch of limbs down. But we were out. So they told me to take all the wounded to Saigon, or to the hospital, is what they said. Well, yeah, I didn't even know where we were, let alone where the hospital was. But I knew where Saigon was, and I knew there was a hospital there. So I said, that's where we're going to go. So as we took off, Tom Crosby, who was the pilot of the other aircraft, who was wounded pretty bad, climbed up on my seat, pulled my helmet away from my ear, and he was screaming at me. I forgot to zeroize the KY-28.
Oh, hell.
Which was our only secure radio, and they had told us if you didn't zeroize it when you went down, you were in deep doo-doo. So it was stuck in his mind, and he was just screaming over and over and over. I forgot to zeroize the KY-28. So I finally told the crew chief to hit him or something and put him on the floor back there and get him off my seat, right? So we finally got everybody in. They were trying to triage all the people in the back that were wounded. So we took them to the hospital in Saigon, let them off, flew back, joined the flight, and started inserting unit after unit after unit into the fight. And every approach into the landing zones, we took heavy enemy fire, and we were getting hit over and over again. So this goes on until about where it's getting dark, and the boss called and said, fuel check. And like a dummy, I told the truth. Everybody else lied, I'm sure, about how much fuel they had, because whoever has the most is getting a mission, and it may not be a good thing. So, but I told the truth, and so he told me to go get resupply, ammunition resupply for the troops, and gave me a grid coordinate as well. I didn't even know where the hell we were, let alone, So I told Crane to get out the map. So he got this map unfolded in the cockpit, and we're trying to figure out where the hell we're going to go, right? And we took off, and we got up to about 300 or 400 feet. I heard this blinding, screaming noise. And I looked down, all the lights flashing on the dash, and it said, no hydraulics. Complete hydraulic loss. So I called the boss and told him we just lost all our hydraulics. So they said, go to Tan An and land, and we'll come get you when we can. So I didn't know where Tan An was either. So I called my platoon leader and admitted that I didn't know where the hell we were and where we were supposed to go. So he come and found me and gave us a heading and direction. And finally he said, you see all those lights out there? And I said, yep. He said, that's Tan An. Go there and land. Then he turned around and went back to join the flight. So Crane and I were trucking toward Tan An, and I told him to get in the CEOI and find the frequency for the runway and for the airport at Tan An. So he did that. So we called him up and told him we were inbound, got an emergency landing situation. We need to have runway lights on, so please turn on your runway lights. And all the guy said was Roger. So when we start getting close, we see this one row of lights lined up, and I said, that's got to be the runway. So we line up and start an approach to these lights, and we get down close to the ground, turned on the landing light, which you don't do at any higher altitude because somebody's going to decide they're going to shoot at you, right? So you wait till you get low before you turn your light on. So we get down close, and I turn the light on. It's a damn bridge with overhead spans on it. So me and Crane are both pulling for all we were worth on the collector, trying to miss the top of this damn bridge. So I called the tower and said, where's the runway lights? He said, we don't have any runway lights. And I said, why the hell did you tell me that to start with, right? I said, I got to have some way to mark a runway. He said, I have some beanbag lights in the tower. I said, okay, go put them on the runway and turn them on. So we're flying a circle around. We see these lights start popping down the runway. I said, okay, we got it now. So we turned final approach to the runway, which is a PSP runway. And I told Crane to give me airspeed and altitude all the way down. And he kept telling me we were a little too fast. And when we hit the ground, I must have been doing 100 miles an hour. And we were sliding down the runway toward the end. And I finally thought about rolling the throttle off, which we did. Both put our both right feet on the right pedal and pushed and slid to a stop. So, and it got exciting after that. They had a little attack on the perimeter. The crash truck came by the front and crashed. When we tried to put the aircraft on wheels, the tail boom broke loose. I think we counted 98 bullet holes in the tail boom of that thing. But anyway, Tiger Tail came and got us the next morning and slung load the aircraft out and took us back to our area. So when I went in the op center, the boss was in there, Major Dom, and he looked at me and I could tell he hadn't been asleep. His eyes were blood red. And he said, tell me on your own words what happened. So I stood there and told him, start to finish, what best I knew about it. Even drew him a little picture, which I think I've sent you, Crane, but I ain't sure. If I ain't, I'll send it to you. The landing zone and all the things that happened. And so he asked me a question here and there, and then when he got through, he nodded his head and he turned around and he had a piece of rolled up paper in his hand, and he said, I ain't supposed to do this, but here, and he handed me the paper. And I unrolled it, and it was a set of aircraft commander orders. He bypassed all the check rides and everything and gave me the set of aircraft. And he said, you deserve that, if anybody does. And he started out the door, and he stopped. And he said, if I had to bet on one guy living through this shit, it'd be you, because you keep a cool head in a tight situation. And that was one of the best compliments I ever got from the boss. and another digression back into this story with when we were on the ground there trying to extract the crew, Major Dom called me and said, if it gets too hot down there, you can pull out. And I said to him, hot hell, they've already shot a small lead mine at us. How much hotter could it get? And he chuckled and said, do what you gotta do. And I said, okay. So that's the best I remember all that happening, Crane. So you do what you can with it. I appreciate it.
I have a question.
Okay.
When was
I believe it was, I can't remember the exact date, it was August of 68, I believe. July, August of 68. I'd only been there, I'd been there maybe not quite 3 months, I guess, and Crane, I think, had been there maybe 2 weeks or 3 weeks, I don't know.
Oh, wow.
We had a whole grand total of less than 4 months experience in the cockpit that day. So we weren't long on experience.
Saved a lot of folks, though.
We did, and we saved Crosby, and every reunion he would buy me all the drinks I could hold, and his wife was even more appreciative. And he passed away last year.
Aww.
But I gave him 50 some odd years longer.
Yeah?
Yeah.
You sure did.
How far away were y'all
From the end of the runway? Well, we were right at the end of the runway. I mean, we were 20, 30 yards from the end of the runway, maybe, at most.
What's a PSP again? What kind of runway was it?
Perforated steel planking.
Oh.
It's like a puzzle that fits together. It's planks of steel that hook together like a puzzle and make a runway or a road, or use it extensively in Vietnam.
It's always spark when they landed on it.
Well, yeah, it was metal to metal, so
Yeah.
there was sparks flying every which way.
Especially going 100 miles an hour.
Yeah, we were going a little fast.
Did you say that part of your window was blown out too?
Yeah, mud and blood mostly on the windscreen and the chin bubble, so I couldn't see very well. So I had to stick my head out the door to land the thing, and that was part of why Crane was giving me airspeed and altitude, because I couldn't see very well. Trying to focus on finding the runway with beanbag lights, right? No runway lights. Okay, brother, I'll mail this thing back to you right away. Later, bye.
Well, there you have it, boys. A true Vietnam War story told to you by a true American war hero. And you know what? That's not just my opinion. In recognition of his valor on the battlefield that day, Charlie was awarded one of our nation's highest commendations, the Silver Star. You know, Manny, it was once said long, long ago by a great French philosopher who, in talking about soldiers' valor on the battlefield, wrote, "Valor is stability, not of legs and arms, but of courage and the soul." Charlie's heroic war story you heard today is just one of the many stories yet to be told about the valor of the guys I served with, the boys of the 68th.